I didn't realize Joe's story was going to be so moving and include me as an irrelevant I'm finding out now that all the hours he had to sit and listen to my long-winded badinage backstage have led him to this creative apotheosis here. I couldn't be more chuffed because I adore Joe. He's very funny occasionally. He was laughing. That's a joke between comics. You guys are civilians. So here's the thing. That's what we call you. I grew up in San Carlos, California, of course, pining always to come to San Francisco, where coffee houses had machines that made foam in the coffee. I grew up in the 60s and 70s in San Carlos because I'm a little bit older than Joe and a little bit younger than fucking Coit Tower. So exactly, right? In those days, I was a teenager. I had just finished high school, and I graduated early. But I could have graduated earlier. I'd gotten a bunch of extra credits. I was in an alternative high school, in my high school. This is something you'd never hear of now because, as you know, in this day and age, school teachers are the enemy because they want entitlements. And exactly. Those entitlements would keep people who run giant oil corporations and companies that make bombs from making as much money as they ought to in the free market system. So when I was in high school, there was this crazy notion that you were supposed to have creativity and latitude in the learning program, therefore children's minds might be expanded somewhat, as well as, of course, meeting in the parking lot for what we called reefing and beefing. Or rather behind the portables, more precisely. So in my high school, they had an alternative school within a school called Ilios, who's supposed to be the Greek god of the sun, who I'm almost certain is named Helios. In any case, it was still going on when I got to high school. It started in the late 60s, early 70s, when people were tired of the traditional format of school where everyone sits in a classroom and you're all lumped together, people with diverse interests who have nothing in common and don't want to hear about Melville. And it's a common thread, both in school and in life. People rarely want to hear about Melville. I'm almost certain that Melville's contemporaries really didn't want to hear about it. Certain Cooper and Hawthorne were like, ease up. Get to the point, Herman. So, does he die? Does he get it? We went to Ilios, and you were allowed to sign up for courses. It was like college, and there was no hard math and no hard science, but you could do everything else. What we would call in those days, I don't know if they still do, call a liberal arts education, meaning you would be almost utterly unemployable at the end. But you'd probably be able to silkscreen. Maybe write a poem poorly. For PE, I remember we used to sometimes fly kites. The 70s were groovy, man. The 70s delivered what the 60s promised, in my opinion. That's what's so disappointing about living this long. When I was little, there was revolution and riots and assassinations and tumult. And then as I got to be a teenager, there was groovy black chicks bust into our school who wore plaid miniskirts and had natural forks in their hair and listened to Stevie Wonder's doo-doo up on their fucking boomboxes while they wore giant brown leather boots. And I thought, the world's going to be better. Because there was, Angela Davis and blaxploitation films, and shit was groovy, and there was the group War. Everybody got represented. There were American Indians took over Alcatraz, and women were going to be cool. And then then the 80s happened, and we learned that all of that was wrong. And then there's now, and we learned that not only was all of it wrong, it was mistold to begin with, and it was all wrong. It never really happened at all. And that if it did, it shouldn't have. So in any case, I was in Helios, and I managed to eke out, I think, half a credit for the first quarter, because all I did was smoke pot and do nothing. And then I finally got myself together and became, took a million classes and whatnot. Here's a game we played in one of the Helios classes. It was, we pretended to be the government during World War II. And I was the president, how about that? I didn't roll around in a wheelchair with a cigarette holder. I am that pretentious and was. Even in high school, I would have liked to have had a dog named Fella and addressed the public each week on the radio. We were given all these moral dilemmas to conquer and whatnot. And this one, in this particular scenario, in this class, was we were the government during the war, and we've just beaten Germany, and now we have to face Japan. And the question was, do we bomb them, right? Do we drop the atomic bomb? And this isn't a school class, by the way. If any school is teaching this now, I would send my kid to that school. I don't know that. I don't know what they teach in curriculum in schools anymore. I noticed the other day that the Kurt Vonnegut Foundation was having to give out copies of Slaughterhouse-Five because they're so often banned in schools now. In any case, I was the president, and I forget, one of my friends was the vice president, and we all discussed it. We had a cabinet meeting, right? And I had the ambassador from Japan, who was this very nice girl, who one was sure was a lesbian, and with short red hair, somber, and I mean, we all had, that was the other thing. I knew millions of gay kids in high school, and we actually didn't care, and that's what kills me. About 40 years later, we're still talking about gay marriage and gay rights, and what did President Obama say? His views are evolving. Really? Well, fucking get out of the ocean and climb up onto the land. You're the same age as me, man. Surely you met some gay kids back in Chicago and stuff. Okay, they're evolving, all right. She gave this very eloquent speech about how the Japanese are a dignified, beautiful people, and that we ought to not bomb them atomically because it would destroy their psyche and be an irrevocably inhuman act that could never be undone. And being, I think, 16 at the time, I listened carefully to her argument and went, no, we're bombing them. No way am I committing 2 million men to this fucking invasion, right? And which is, I think, the same decision FDR came to, and then thinking, of course, ahead, and then later we'll be able to exploit Asia. So, in any case, I could have graduated early, but I went to my guidance counselor, Mr. Ireland, who looked almost exactly like Burl Ives. And, he was rotund, and he had the weird Folksinger beard, and the wire-rimmed glasses and whatnot, and might have been one of the 2 or 3 most punishingly stupid people I've ever met in my entire life. Absolutely no wherewithal whatsoever. So he had the perfect job guiding young people. He was called a guidance counselor. You were supposed to go to him for advice, right? And I got called in one day because I'd acted up in foods class. Mrs. Lee, I shared a table with 3 other dudes, right? Mike Navy, and someone named Steve Sharippa, and Rick Bailey. And Rick Bailey, we would go to his house and listen to Imma Gumma by Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin 2 and get real fucking high right after the thing. And he ended up being like a colonel in the military and serving with distinction in Iraq, which I'm very proud of him for. And of course, I had no way of finding out 2 years later when I see him, and he's like, "Hi, Greg." And I'm like, "Rick? Didn't we used to listen to 8 tracks of Uma Guma?" That was an album by them. In any case, Mrs. Lee would come into foods class, and we took it because it was a skate, and all the cheerleaders were in the class, and they wore their short skirts on cheerleader day. And you don't have to go all quiet, we were boys. And I didn't say Mr. Ireland was there. And it was easy. All you did, we were going to make a blueberry pie. That's what you would do. It's called food. It wasn't even home ec, which which still was existent in those extant. There was still home economics in those days. It was foods. And it was first period, so it was bloody early, so we had to get high extra early. Which made foods class awesome, because the point of foods class was you were going to make food. So we made a blueberry pie and whatnot, and Mrs. Lee was a serious drinker, I believe, because she would come in and she'd go, all right, today we're gonna make pie, and what you do first is you get the tin, right, and she would be like, Julia Child on like a fucking 8-day binge, right? Just barely open the tins and whatnot, and she's stirring madly, and she's flying everywhere. So I'd said something in class, or I'd smarted off, or I came in high, or I was late, or whatever the fuck it was, and I got sent to my guidance counselor, and he went, oh, I know what it was. He goes, Mrs. Lee says you're always high in class. And I go, really? Because she's always drunk. And somehow you're not allowed to express that opinion when you're 16 years old, even though it was God's fucking crystal truth, right? They weren't happy with me. So finally, I realized that I've got 1 million units, and I go to Mr. Ireland. I think I have like 500 units or something, and he's like, oh, you could have graduated a semester ago. And I'm like, you're guiding me? So it's kind of a good experience, because his incompetence is what I found all along the line throughout the rest of my adult life. That anyone who's in a position of mild power above you is usually insipid at best, and more like an arid fucking Sufi desert full of blanched cow skulls, pools of alkali, and signs that are poorly spelled. I'd turn back if I were you. I managed to graduate, and then I had a year in between it before I was a little directionless, you might say. My parents weren't the most, I don't know if the supportive is the word. They knew I lived with them. I was the one with all the hats in my room. So, I was unemployed. I didn't love my life very much. I smoked weed constantly. That part hasn't changed. And, as Louis Armstrong said, it helps with the blues. I really had nothing doing. I liked hanging out with my cousin Johnny, who lived across town from me, and used to play basketball with young Barry Bonds, who also grew up in San Carlos, which is where I'm from, the whitest place on earth. I needed a job. I looked in the want ads, the classified ads in the paper. There was no Craigslist in those days. There was no Computi or Interweb or anything like that. You got San Mateo Times, and I went to the classified section, and there it was, an ad that said, Chicken Delight, need driver, must have car, W/INS, own insurance, right? Apply directly, California Avenue, Burlingame. So I drives up to Burlingame, California Avenue in Burlingame, and there was the Chicken Delight, right? I don't think it's there anymore, but there was a giant statue of a chicken above the Chicken Delight. The chicken was wearing a chef's outfit and had horribly killed and cooked another chicken. The pieces of the chicken were on the platter to be displayed. The chicken was providing you with its own, heaven knows if it was his own progeny. And that was supposed to whip you into a taste frenzy. The key with Chicken Delight was they delivered, right, in case you had a shred of self-respect left in your life. And it was also called Pizza Man. Pizza Man stroke, Chicken Delight. So I push it in, and the bell rings, ding, ling, ling, ling. And there I meet the owner, the proprietor of Chicken Delight. And no, I didn't have the chicken on my car. I do remember those. If you go back long enough, you'll remember people used to have the actual chicken on top of the car, right? You didn't have to do that. It was far too gone as a franchise. I think just the name was still there. So I go in and I meet him, and his name's Lonnie, and he's about 30-something, a hard case, sort of lank hair parted in the middle, scruffy little groovy. Everyone has a jazz beard in this story. A little jazz beard, hockey face, right? Rimmed black eyes, shortish, and tats, right? So in the 70s, if someone had tattoos, there was only 2 reasons for that. One, they worked a Ferris wheel at a carnival, or they killed their commanding officer. Commemorated it in ink on the blog. So Lonnie goes, you got a car? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you got your own insurance? I'm like, yeah. He goes, it's a buck a run, and if anybody hits you, don't tell them you fucking work here. Be back at 4. So I thought, $1 a run, that's a lot of money. This is the 70s. Gum was a nickel, phone calls were a dime, right? Gas was 27 cents, I think. I know. I really feel like my dad telling a story right now. Where my dad would tell me stories about World War II, and you'd be like, no, the world was never like that. No one sold fruit from a truck on your street. No one brought ice and tongs up a staircase. I comes back at 4. How hard can it be? I have nothing going on, right? All I want to do is listen to the Ramones, smoke weed, hang out with my cousin Donnie, and do fuck nothing. I hate my life. I hate the world. So I push back in at 4, and I'm introduced to the other driver, Stumpy. Stumpy's wearing what appears to be a brown UPS uniform. I didn't know there was like a regulation chicken driving uniform. I was wearing this is the late 70s, like a V-neck long sleeve sweater and big bells and fucking Ian Hunter Motley Hoople hair. Because I was a down by law. He-she beads. I don't know if anybody remembers he-she beads. Awesome. And so I goes to Stumpy like, wow, that's quite a, ensemble. And he's like, gets me more tips because it's official. You mean the people you deliver pizza to in Millbrae are wowed by the uniform? I have your food in the car. I'll be back with it in a moment. Thank you, Commodore, for what I just So, Lonnie's mother works there, Tina, and she's in a wheelchair. And maybe a week went by before I realized she didn't need the wheelchair. She got up at one point after a few days after I worked there and walked over like this and got a soda and went back and sat down in the wheelchair. After like 5 days, like, what the fuck? I go, Tina, are you okay? And she's like, oh, I don't need it. It's just easier. She would roll up and down the counter in this wheelchair. And answered a giant green phone, right? And in those days, no computers. You wrote every order on a slip of paper, and that got handed to Lonnie, and then that slip of paper got handed to you. It had the address of wherever you were going in your order. And his sister worked there too, Louise, and she was in charge of having black roots and being slutty. She had amazingly colored peroxide hair that was like, there wasn't enough conditioner in the world, really, to resolve the issues that Louise had created with her hair. She was slightly overweight. There's a Texas expression that I'm reminded of. 20 pounds of meal in a 10-pound sack. That's what her jeans looked like. And her boyfriend worked there as well, Bobby. And Bobby was one of those, he was like, I don't know if you remember the actor Michael Sarrazin. He was like Michael Sarrazin in a gang movie or something, kind of sexy and unbelievably skeezy. And a predilection for taking acid almost every day. And So his personality was diffuse at best and aggressive at the worst of times. And so I sally forth, right, on the first night. I'd never delivered a pizza. I'm an inexperienced because you're given a styrofoam oven to put in the back of the car. We call it an oven. It actually was just a warmer. And that's where everything lived in there. And you'd go to each house. And there was no GPS, no global positioning system then. There was a map of the pizza area on the wall, like Churchill's war room. This I have no idea where Lonnie, with his limited intellect and meager resources, got. I'm assuming the map had lived there for fucking ever. Like a blue marine topographical map, right? And Burlingame and Millbrae Cemetery. And then there was, fantastically, a circle drawn that proscribed the area, the circumference of the area we were to work. Outside the circle was decidedly dicey. And you only did those orders if it was the end of the night, right? Because then you could just take it and go home. So I did 25 runs my first night, which as a novice I was led to understand was quite a big deal. That was a lot. It was an unofficial record for Chicken Delight. And even though Lonnie, I'm almost certain, thought I was a fruit because of my hair and my V-neck t-shirt, he was happy, as happy as he could be. And he said, "Hey, Proops, you smoke weed?" And I go, "Yeah, man." Come back in the back, right? So go in the back room to the prep area in the kitchen, right? Because out in front was all the deep fryers. Because it was pizza. Unspeakable pizza. Pasta, like ricotta-filled things that you might live through. French fries and whatnot, and the chicken, of course, the delightful chicken. Spelled with an ITE, because the Cold War, it was important that things have frivolity in them. Right? Now it'd be like, chicken blend. Or whatever, or it would have a fake ethnic name like Chakota or something. But in those days, things were aramas and aganzas and delights and things like that, and big clowns and things like that. It was funner. So we go back to the prep area where the chickens were put in milk in a process. This will probably keep you off ever going to the chicken place. I worked there for a while. I never, ever ate a piece of chicken. There were bus trays, and they were full of milk, and the chicken soaked in those. And then it was put into a breading mixture of broken glass and herbs and cat liquor. As my friend Jeff Davis would say, shady with a capital D. He says, he reveals to me that he's not only did he ask, do I smoke weed, he in fact is a purveyor of marijuana, right? In these pre-dispensary days, I sell weed, and I'm like, groovy, right? I'll buy some. And then he goes, I also sell crank, bro, right? And crank is what we called it in those days. Now it's known by its sexier, hipper TV name, meth. But it was the same thing, right? It was amphetamines, that most egalitarian of drugs, crank, made in the time-honored tradition, the way all great drugs in America are made, in a sink of a member of a motorcycle gang. So, I'd worked one night, I did 25 runs plus tips, I bought a quarter ounce of weed, I bought a dime bag of crank. I thought, fucking shit's turning around. I lit up a cool, and I put on fucking KSOL, and Rick James came on. You and I, we've been together since, right? So, every day I go to work, right, and spend all my money. And first of all, if you've never taken methamphetamine or snorted crank, it was yellow. It wasn't even white, like, oh Christ. Oh my God, what if my story's not commemorated for posterity? Nice tuck here. Crank was yellow, not white like cocaine, and it smelled like rotting fruit in a crate. I'm not certain how to describe. More like rotting vegetables. It was really nasty. The smell of it. Just the smell before you snorted it. And like I say, it was yellowy and fairly lethal. So the first hit of, just the look, right? Like it was a yellow powder, like you chopped up a bunch of, like Valiums or something. This is the part of the show where everyone goes quietly awkward and pretends they haven't ingested it. And sucks back into their own mind. Greg, I've never had a problem like you. I don't even know what color Valiums are. 10 grades are yellow. So, it was really harsh, right? You'd lay it down, and it was in chunks, but the chunks came apart fairly easily. The clusters broke up, right? You didn't have to do the endless thing of coke. The difference with why I think crank is more egalitarian is cocaine is an exclusive drug, and the people who do it are generally asshats. The people who sell you coke are unspeakable fucking selfish douchebags, and they always were. Any coke dealer you ever meet is going to be a fucking asshole, right? And then the people who do it like go, hey, come in the bathroom, and then everybody hides and no one shares it. It's like the anti-marijuana, right? You light up a joint and you pass it around. Everybody has some. With coke, it's like, well, I'm going to do it in the corner of my mouth. So no one shares it because it's so expensive. Crank was fucking cheap, man. And also with coke, especially then, you didn't even know if you were high. Like you do something, and be like, fucking, I don't feel anything. With crank, you felt it. So you chop out a line of crank, right, and fucking wonk, right? And of course, we had straws at the store, so we could cut the straws to straws. Straws. Sorry, I have a big, created, invented personality. I mispronounce things woefully. Yeah, we had straws, and you could cut them, right? And so, you do the hit of the crank. And the first hit of crank, there was an explosion of pain at the back of your head. Like a burning, ammoniac, as if you had taken cleanser and just shoved it up. Like Comet or Ajax mixed with Bonamine and like Clorox. It really, first hit, fucking Badoomba, And your eye, you burst into, your tears burst out immediately. You're crying and you're like, oh shit. Then the second hit. Slightly less painful. And it made you want to do one thing. Light a cigarette and then jump out of your goddamn skin. Unlike cocaine, the minute you took a hit of crank, you were fucking wired, right? You could run across America, you could drive around all night long, smoking cigarettes, listening to soul music, delivering chickens to the wilds of fucking Burlingame. And into the next day if you needed to. You're never fucking going to sleep. You could grow a festering, pustulent boil behind your ear in just a matter of hours. It accelerated so many processes in your body. What you couldn't do was eat a piece of chicken, a piece of pizza, or any kind of food whatsoever until it had worn off. As long as there was soda pop and cool cigarettes, it was going to be okay. So every night I would work there, and every night I would spend all the money I made buying crank and weed from Robert, Lonnie. He had the most beautiful, almost mafia-like system of employment where I was basically an indentured servant, providing my own insurance and gasoline, and happy to do it. Delighted that I no longer had to go look for weed once a week or call up the other assholes I knew, but rather the guy I worked for would actually provide me with it at a very reasonable price. So after hours, when things quieted down, I would come in every day, right? And when you came in the afternoon, you would hear him upstairs, right? You'd hear Lonnie upstairs. The door would go ring, 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 right? When you walked in, and you'd hear, and you'd hear the bell, ring, ring, ring. Proops! Fold some fucking boxes! That was him chopping lines. You'd hear him upstairs. He had one of the plates upturned, and he'd be doing lines of crank off the plate, right? So, I don't know if you know many people who do speed on a daily basis. Their personality tends to be focused in one area. Anger. They're not that happy anymore because after a few days of doing speed, you don't have any other emotions. You just need to do speed to maintain the fucking hatred that you have built up against yourself to do the fucking speed that you gotta keep doing. Because you own a chicken delight place and your mother's pretending to be in a wheelchair. So, Lonnie, he informed me, had been in the Marines, at least for a while. And I guess until his sergeant gave him some back talk. And then he had been a guest of several institutions in the California penal system. Folding boxes was ignominious. Those you had to fold the pizza boxes. That was the worst part of the job. But only until about 5. You get in about 4:30. Then the orders started coming in, and then you could go. At the end of the night, about 10:30 is when we wrapped. We wrapped. It was like show business. Okay, that's it, everybody. Lunch. I saw you about a Greg. We've adjourned to the back room, right? Where the prepping room with the chicken laying in the buckets of milk and the unspeakable preparation. There was also a bandsaw. I'm not very handy. The straight up saw that's just a horrible blade like that just goes. And that's when he cut the chicken on. Lonnie would get the chicken in big crates on ice, right, and take the birds out and go and then cut them up and then throw them in the milk. And 2 little children made the chicken preparation, right? 2 little kids would pull up on their stingrays, Timmy and Mike, and they were like 8 and 10, and they had little stingrays, and they pull them up and throw them in the alley, and they had to soak the chicken in the milk and then put it in the brew thing, and then they didn't deep fry or anything, they just did all the prep work, right? And he paid them in marijuana. They were like 8 years younger than me, and they were being paid in dough, right? So now at 10 o'clock, thank you, Joe. I heard them laugh on that. Oh, it was fun for the whole family. His father worked there too, well, he didn't work there. The dad would just drive by. But, Tina and Louise and Bobby and me and Lonnie and Stumpy and Timmy and Stumpy. We adjourned to the back room, right? And he had a record player in the back room. That was the party area. And, we'd have beer and whatnot, or like RC Colas. And thank you for remembering RC Colas. He had 2 records. A completely pirated bootleg LP of a label I'd never seen before of James Brown's greatest hits. But like an obscure label, like, the Persimmon label. Like, what? There's no label called that. And he had Rod Stewart's Footloose and Fancy Free. So, there was 2 records that we listened to. So he would put on James Brown and we'd all dance, right? And we'd get high in the back room and drink and snort speed, and the kids would get high and we would, unwind. Lonnie hands me a joint one night, right? His eyes red and his pupils dilated beyond all measure. And his sister goes, "Be careful if Lonnie hands you a joint, because he puts angel dust in hands." So, again, you guys, you can't imagine how judgmental and parochial you seem to me right now. You really just went, this happened in 1978, you guys. It hasn't hurt your life. No children were harmed in the making of this story. These are the drugs we did then. By the way, if you're a parent now, I would look out for, I don't know, K and E and Whiz and what is it, Meow Meow. There's like a million things now that make our drugs look like just fucking Tinker Toys. So, and meth, good old-fashioned meth, still around and still going. Still exploding eyeballs. And making teeth fall out. This is what I'm getting at. Lonnie, because he did so much crank, the only way he could really cut it loose and get into that nirvana state was to smoke horse tranquilizer, right? Whereas you might have a psychotic episode. Or have all your personalities dissolved. And have a therapy bill that's never ending. He actually would be relaxed. There's been one time in the day he wasn't furious. When I came in, Proops! When I come back, God damn it, you lazy order! Fucking end of the night, I feel good. And I would now, right? And he'd hand you his joint and be like, is that one gone? And you go, And so, we didn't, I pulled the line, I drew the line there. I didn't want to be, although I had smoked it later. Strangely, smoking PCP at a Gino Vanelli concert. Now, I don't know. You'd think you'd go see Ted Nugent or something, you know, Cat Scotch Fever or whatever. But Gino Vanelli, the sexy Canadian, you know, with the frou-frou hair and the tight pants that you could see, you know, his, actual sperm coursing through his body. Really tight pants. I remember seeing him on a big tour. I think it was at the Berkeley Community Theater, and he was wearing knee boots and this floofy shirt and shit. And just, oh my Christ in heaven. My poor friend Jeff spent the whole night in the bathroom. And I remember we collected him there at the end of the night. The show was over. We just walked into the men's room at the Berkeley Community Theater. And he is laying there. And he just picked him up and took him out. And he loved Gino Vanelli. And I think I was wearing like a blue fedora and purple high-waisted bell-bottoms. You know? So, on and on it went. Finally, Blondie came to town because they were the only other thing I liked, right? And Deborah, and because we loved Deborah Harry, and my cousin Donnie and I worshipped her, right? And so Blondie came, and we got an extra big bunch of crank that night, and drove up to Winterland, and we drank many beers that we had bought illegal. I was the designated person to buy alcohol because I wore a hat. I had a scarf, right? So I would light a cigarette and go right into, 16 years old, walk into the liquor store like this, right? I go, let me have a 6-pack of Tuborg Gold and a pint of peppermint schnapps, you know? I was the shadow. Thank you, my good man. Later, I'd been given a fake ID. It was a real ID, but it wasn't my ID. And you may remember this in the 70s, before the age of being rubbed beneath the equator at the airport in order to maintain security. In the 70s, there were states that didn't have photos on their driver's licenses. The state of Connecticut simply gave you a card that you signed. And my name from the guy who'd stolen the card and given it to me was Bernard Cranston. Not Barnard, Brainard. B-R-A-N. And I'd never even heard of the name. Like, is that Brainard or Bernard? So I was always designated to buy out. And then I remember one of my friends said to me, how is it that you're way underage, but you always can buy alcohol and they never fucking question you? I went, act like you're older. Don't come in and go, in those days, in your like, you know, Aerosmith t-shirt or whatever. And yes, we still have Aerosmith. Over 400 years later. Walk stride manfully up to the counter and demand that alcohol. Throw down a crispy and fuck off. Feel smartly. 2 6-packs of Rainier Ale, please. And I'm in something of a hurry. Well, Cools always. And Merritt's. I think we took Merritt's. I don't even know if Merritt's are cigarettes. So, we go to Blondie, and we're very excited. We drive to Winterland. And I don't know if you remember where Winterland was on, but Steiner and Fillmore, right? And the neighborhood in those days was decidedly ropey, right? It was in the middle of a big old bunch of projects, and the only thing left from the ancient times was the Fillmore. The Fillmore, things used to fall off the ceiling. Every time I went to the Fillmore, inevitably someone would be sick to their stomach, and an enormous circle would form around that area. No one ever cleaned anything up or did anything. And it was what the late Bill Graham used to call festival seating. That meant there were no fucking seats whatsoever. And you were supposed to stand for hours and hours through an impossibly loud rock concert. And so the Grateful Dead there, and all kinds of bands. Ronnie, everybody's dead. Ronnie James Dio, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, right? Long live rock and roll. And he's sort of a warlock, you know. I don't know what was going on, but I remember I had a piece of the floor. I don't know what I did with it. I lost it because the floor was parquet. It was a beautiful old ballroom, but it was completely, you know, shoddy and ravaged. And you could pull up pieces of the floor. Someone always got sick near me. And things used to fall off the ceiling when the music got really loud. If there was too much bass, you'd be standing there and all of a sudden, like, pieces of the ceiling. So we go to see Blondie and we drink a lot of beer. We're getting in and we pull in and we're parking. We found parking. There was no parking lots whatsoever for the Fillmore. And the neighborhood was ropey. And we're standing there and my friend's parking the car. And I'm drunk, right? And I'm like, you know, whoa, I'm in the street. I think we're on Steiner on the other side of Fillmore. And here comes a black Cadillac with wire spoke wheels and red interior. It should have set something off, but I was too much of a fucking moron to pick up any of the fucking portent. So the car goes by me, and I have no right to be standing in the street drunk. The car kind of, hey, and I go, fuck you, right? Because I'm, you know, high, and I'm from the suburbs. And I'm having a good time in San Francisco, and I thought that was what you did. So the car stops. Yeah. So, uh-oh. Exactly. And it rolls back quite slowly. And the window goes down, and 2 Samoan dudes are sitting in it who weigh about 450 pounds each, right? And there's burgundy interior, and the crushed thing, and the wheel made out of a chain, and the spokes on the chrome things. And their eyes are burning like fucking unbelievable asteroids coming through space. And they go, is there a problem? And I go, I managed to get it out. No, there's no problem. Everything's cool. Because if there's a problem, we'll settle it. And I'm like, no, man, that's cool. Are you sure everything's cool? I'm pretty sure, yeah. The window goes up and they fucking run away. I thought they were going to fucking rape me, shoot me, and then rape me again. It's the entire goddamn thing. I could barely speak. My heart was pounding. I sat on the curb and went, I was almost killed by Samoan gangsters because I was being an asshole. Like, what gangsters? So we go in to see Blondie. We've done an epic amount of crank. And crank makes you jinky. Jinky like a squirrel that's being chased by Hamas. Epic amounts of alcohol, right? It's like Coke in that respect, but there's no way to really quell it. And as much weed as you can get down. In those days, you could smoke weed inside venues. In fact, you could smoke inside venues. In fact, there was freedom, and everyone was considered to be an adult. And no one drank water from a bottle ever. We drank soda pop from fucking plastic and paper cups. How did we live? Goodness. So the first band comes on, and because it was a Bill Graham show, Bill Graham had this way, especially when punk and new wave came out. Bill Graham was set in his ways. His favorite band was The Dead, and he managed Santana. So no matter what show you went to see in San Francisco for about 30 years, The Dead or Santana were likely to be on it. And if they weren't, then another band that you hated was going to be on it with the bands that you liked. And he would do, like I remember, the bill was the Ready-Mades, Blondie, and REO Speedwagon. On the Venn diagram of rock, REO Speedwagon is on the opposite end. It's like, no, you don't have Yes and The Clash on the same band. You don't have Katy Perry and like a raga band on the same. So, but he always did. So the first band finishes, and I'm like to my cousin Donnie, I have got to urinate. I've drank 1,000 beers. I've almost been killed by Samoan gangsters. I've taken my own life into my own stupid hands. I'm cranking on all, control. He goes, I'm not moving, because we could see where Deborah was going to come out, and he was right up front. We were right up front. So I, of course, went to the bathroom. By the time I come back, no way can I get to him. We can see it, people. I see his hairdo and the white scarf he's wearing. Deborah came out, and they were quite good, and then we left. So we go back to the pizza place, and this went on night after night. I would do the crank, drive around the hills, and buy weed from my boss, right? And get high with an 8-year-old and dance to James Brown. Eventually, and they were regulars, right? Like many people who ordered Chicken Delight every night.